Hi there, adapters and Adapter TechX listeners. Great to have you back. Today, we're going to talk about revenue management and the notion of yield, optimization of assets, and speak with an expert in the space, Ali Northfield. Ali is the managing director and co-founder of Revenue by Design, who provides revenue management outsourced solutions. So we're going to have a great chat about that today. The other point I'd like to make everybody aware of is there's the Global Revenue Forum in London on January 31st at the Hilton Bankside. And everybody should attend who actually wants to learn something and actually integrate their thinking into their business. So that will be fun. The title of the conference is Catalyst for Conversation, and there's 3 events that we're going to dig into, that all coalesce, and we'll explore how all this happened with in London, Milan, and Stockholm. So get tickets now at globalrevenueforum.com. Ali, it is great to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you very much.
Yep, and you're in sunny Mallorca.
I am indeed,
I understand.
It's not quite so
Is it
sunny today, but it has been sunny. Yes, so it's good. It's very warm.
But is it warm?
Yeah, it's around about sort of 20 degrees.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're showing off now. We're in the cold north. Yeah, that's good. So that sounds really wonderful. So when we were chatting about, speaking of cold and comfort, we were talking about that your comfort food is something that most people wouldn't think top of mind. And do you want to share your comfort
Okay,
food?
my comfort.
When things are really
When
rough?
things are really rough, my go-to comfort food is shepherd's pie. So
Okay.
what is that?
Ooh. There's a certain population knows what shepherd's pie is. What
So
is
it's
shepherd's
basically,
pie?
it's a meat sauce with lots of lovely, really nicely cooked meat with, I don't know, maybe even red wine and some vegetables. And then it's topped with potatoes, which are then, and then it's put in the oven and it's baked off so that the top is nice and crispy. And I think I'm thinking it's like a northern thing, but certainly my parents, who came from Liverpool, just loved shepherd's pie. So that was kind of one of their things. And so it reminds me of home. It's like one of those really comforting home things. Really super.
There you go. And I'm sure back in the day in Liverpool, they knew what a good rioja was.
Absolutely.
As you dropped in, oh, by the way, there's some wine in it. Anyway, maybe some Blue Nun
Probably.
in the day. Although I understand Blue Nun is making a
apparently
comeback,
it's a
but
really
that's
good
not what the
wine.
show is
It just
about.
got really annihilated in the UK. So yeah.
Yeah, you could. Yep. Some say. I think Jeremy Clarkson at some point said you could even put that in as antifreeze, but it's actually a good wine. Back in the day. So not that I would say that in any public forum. Anyway, we're here to have a really good chat about the world of yield. But first, can you just ground our listeners in what you do? What does Revenue by Design do, and what category do you service in the yield and revenue
Sure. I mean,
management world?
the sort of problems we solve are basically offering revenue management solutions in one form or another, typically outsourced, which is the primary product, to those hotels in the independent sector primarily that either can see that they cannot afford a full-time revenue management person within the operation, particularly now in terms of managing headcount, or they want to get access to a level of skills that they probably wouldn't be able to access in real terms for in terms of buying in that level of skills, of revenue management skills overall. So there's two areas to it. Either they can't afford the full-time revenue person, or they just want access to a high level of skills. And that's what we do. The other area is to provide training and accreditation for those people that want to have a qualification in revenue management. And then obviously we run the conference, the Catalyst for Conversion conference this year, which is looking at the role of revenue management in converting the customer across each stage of the customer journey, but from the customer perspective, which I think has been lacking in the industry up until now. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of topics there. We're going to just
Okay.
go after all of them. So just going back to the core of working with hotels, what will be your typical customer? How many rooms would they have?
Yeah, I would say that our
Roughly.
sweet spot, I used to say our sweet spot was kind of like around anything between 50 and sort of 150 rooms is where economically it probably makes more financial sense for a hotel to look at outsourcing. I mean, I think if you're slightly bigger, or if you've got, and certainly if you're not just rooms, you can afford to actually have a full-time revenue manager. But so 50 to 150 rooms. But nowadays, I mean, we do have clients that are, I think our smallest client has 10 rooms. And then our largest client has 1,300 rooms in one property. So we are very adept at adapting to the environment within which we need to work. And my team is diverse. So we've got some guys and gals who are really good at total revenue management, looking at the entire asset. And then we have some people who are really switched on in terms of rooms revenue management. So, and we tend to sort of apply the different skill sets to obviously the assets that we're looking at.
So when you think of the big spectrum that's out there, 10 to 1,100, pick it. Well, let's talk average.
Yeah.
So 150, 200, something like that. What problems are you seeing in the marketplace from a pricing perspective and connecting that to the right eyeballs? How do you know that it's the right price at the right time for the right eyeball?
That really does take quite a bit of work in terms of basically teasing out the property value proposition. So typically that's what does that property stand for in the guest's eyes. Then matching up with whether there's anybody else within the market that actually does a similar thing. So what's your competitive environment like, and how do you perform against your competitive environment? And then secondly, looking at what the market can, thirdly, then looking at what the market can actually support. So there is an element of basically understanding what price you can sell at, given the property that you have. And we work with a lot of different quality type properties, and they always have a reason for being. There's always a reason why the guest stays there, irrespective of the quality, the location, or whatever. So you can derive your own price, and you can look at the pace of reservations arrival, your pickup on any one particular day, and then out of that derive a figure that you want to sell the property at. And then typically there's a level of alignment with the market, because you might find that you have other influencing demand factors within the property, such as, for example, if you take a group, that's a huge internally generated demand, but that doesn't mean to say that reflects what's happening in the marketplace. So you then you might think, I can really push the rate because we're almost full, but that doesn't mean to say that the market is also full. So you need to be able to balance those aspects as well. So there's a lot of thought. It's not a question of price bingo, if that's kind of it's, or just throwing something out there and seeing what sticks. That's not how we do it at all.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a very sophisticated world out there when it comes to revenue management, and also price point, and lots of other examples. And obviously we're very, very much interested in adaptation and innovation on this show. So when you're looking at the ones that are driving, scaled adaptation and true innovation, what are the products out there that you think are really making an impact?
I think nowadays having a rooms revenue management system it should be a given. I think moving away, and I think the revenue management systems have done a jolly good job at educating the industry that the level of efficiency you gain from putting a revenue management system in, and the quality of data that you gain, more than accounts for the level of investment. And you have different types of system out there, which will basically support different types of properties as well. That sector, if you like, I think is kind of like done. And there's lots of choice in the market now, and reasonably affordable. I think there's other areas of.
Do you have some examples?
You have the traditional, I shouldn't say traditional, but you have some of the players that have been in the market for a long time, such as Ideas, and then you have your Duetto, and followed on by the entrants like Atomize and Pace, and we use a system called Outperform. Outperform is another revenue management system that's used entirely by companies like myself. So basically people that provide revenue management services. So one of the benefits that we find is that the development path truly reflects the requirements of people who are highly skilled in the environment. So So all of the teams using Outperform across the world basically put forward their development requests to the system, and it's resulted in a very efficient solution for those actually providing revenue management services to hotels. So it's a different way of approaching things. And then there's also the way in which some of these systems work can be very different. So basically, a revenue management system per se is going to be built on business rules. First of all, there are a whole bunch of business rules that a revenue management system seeks to answer in terms of what it's seeing from the demand point of view. Then on top of that, you've got your algorithms, and so there are a couple of sort of basic algorithms that the revenue management system community works from. And then built on top of that, you're going to have any level of AI that might integrate with those sort of stacks, if you like, and also using any AI information, then change the recommendations based on any AI tools that you might have in place. So, yeah, I mean, it's the fundamentals of a revenue management system are not necessarily that complex. It's more where the algorithms fit in, the business rules, how they interact, and then all of this sort of icing on the cake now, which is more of the AI stuff. Sorry.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time unpacking a tech stack because all tech stacks are not created equal, but there's a lot of commonality between it.
Fundamentals,
there's fundamentals of a tech stack. Right, there's fundamentals of a tech stack, and then there's the peripherals that integrate with that to try and make it bespoke to the problem you're trying to solve. So in that context, where are you seeing how do you choose the peripherals for the problem you're trying to solve? And do you have a bag of goodies that you go to and go, oh, we're going to pick that off the shelf, and this off the shelf?
It's really challenging to answer that one, but I think if you were to
I generally ask questions that just aren't very helpful, so I'm working through it.
I'm just thinking around if we just sort of stick to the revenue management systems. I mean, you're going to find that there are some systems that that will allow you to direct the business rules. So if you wanted to have a little bit more engagement with the revenue management system because you want to be more of a guiding element to it, then business rules might be one for you. There are other systems that will bring in, or additional systems that will bring in things like weather impact, things like if you're airline impact. So if you rely heavily on airlift into an area. And then also, obviously, there's the traditional things like events management. So if you have a revenue management system that doesn't recognize events, then there's something awfully wrong. So you have all of these elements, and I think it's gonna impact you depending on the type of hotel that you are and where you are. So if you're on an island, it's really helpful to have airlift information, because that's probably going to be the only thing that's going to bring you guests. So so that's.
You forgot boats.
Oh,
we like boats
too. Sorry,
too.
I forgot. Yes, there's boats. So.
Boats. Yeah, don't forget the boats.
I know, I
don't
won't
be down on boats,
no.
okay?
So, yeah.
Right, going back to airlines.
Getting sort of airlift data in is really helpful if you're in that sort of an environment. And certainly there are other systems that rely heavily on the frequency of data that they take. So there's some systems sell themselves on the fact that they update the data every hour, or it's like there's a super influx of data throughout the day, which means if you're in a rapidly changing corporate environment whereby competitive rates might change quite quickly, then you kind of need to know what's going on possibly a little bit more frequently. I mean, if you're working in London, for example, it's really super helpful to know during the day what's actually happened, what's been the pickup, either sort of on the day, for the day, or and certainly sort of looking out as to how events and other days are behaving depending on the demand that's within the market. So yeah.
Yeah, these peripheral tools that we're speaking about now is what strikes me about this conversation is that when we look at single purpose products that deal with the complexity of yield management, etc., the good ones have the predictive or anticipatory elements that are built into them, right? With the extreme ideas and Duetto, a lot of them have those already in there. Is I'm just pivoting now to the training component, right? So, it's interesting in the sense of most of the people we chat with on this channel is tech related. This is tech, and then how do you train for the operators to actually understand how to go about exploring and using the tools in a way? It's kind of like the pilot and the autopilot. Most of the flight is autopilot,
Yeah.
but someone's got to fly it. So you train
Yeah.
the pilots.
Yeah, we do. I think in terms of understanding how to drive a revenue management system, most of them would say if you leave it to do its stuff and allow it to actually understand the marketplace, some of which can be done very rapidly. I mean, there's been huge leaps in how to get a revenue management system to understand the market quickly now. So you leave it for a while, and then after that, subsequent to that, you would need to guide it. And that's where the skill comes into understanding, firstly, what the system cannot know, because there's certain things that humans can see pretty much obviously. So for outside the window, for example, if it's suddenly very foggy, or there's a volcano that's suddenly spurting dust into the environment, you need to tell the system that. So you need to have the ability to interpret and understand when you need to have a hands-on approach and when you need to have a hands-off approach. But in terms of the training, so my approach to training has always been a really practical one. I think there's gallons of training out there in terms of what the theory of revenue management is and how it works. But actually understanding how to put all of the business processes and all of the, there's always cornerstones of revenue management that everybody talks about, and it just depends who you're talking to as to how many there are. But there are quite a few. There's lots of cornerstones on revenue management. So it's understanding how those work and then applying them in practice, which is where we find that we get the most engagement from people that we train.
You take somebody who is new. How long does it take them to be proficient with your training system?
Typically, we do a combination of technical training and also coaching in terms of the theory of revenue management, and communication skills and data analysis. So there's a lot that goes into it. So the technical side is really just getting them to understand how systems work, what you need to do to make sure that you've got the right data going into the system. So that would be things like interfaces, making sure that you've got competitive rate data typically from a secondary source, such as OTA Insights, or some people use Booking.com as a competitive analysis tool. And then so basically getting them to learn how to sit in the driving seat. And then it's applying the strategy across the board, which is basically trained in through coaching. That could be basically somebody actually physically on a call with you, looking at the data and asking you for interpretive solutions. Or it could be that you go online. So we have online training packages that people can just hop onto. So for example, if somebody wants to know how to do some forecasting, so if you want to ratify the forecast that your revenue management system is showing you, and you don't have the skills to do a manual forecast, then you can just pop in and you can buy a module on forecasting. So that's kind of like another way that we're serving the community by making the sort of like the key elements accessible through our online training platform.
Perfect. So now let's kind of move a little bit towards the event and the third leg of the stool here. Why did you start the event? And it's really expanded now into a number of cities that are running the program concurrently on January 31st of 2023 in London. How did that evolve?
The three companies that are running the events simultaneously this year used to run events very close together at the beginning of the year. And so during COVID, I really was thinking that it's going to be a challenge for all of us to get enough people to three events in the first year afterwards. And so it just crossed my mind to phone them and just say, do you fancy doing an event together? and really sharing best practice from what we've learned over the past few years, and also building community. I think the concept of community building is really strong amongst all of the three founders of Global Revenue Forum. They really want to be able to share best practice, which does change from market to market, and you can learn from other people. Really, there's a lot of super stuff that we can exchange. So that's resulted in Global Revenue Forum, and the way we actually interact with each other is that we share the keynote speakers across each location throughout the day, and a few other top line, high level speaking engagements, like the Petra Kucha, for example, which is always good fun, and that gets streamed across all three locations. So we share the agenda, and hopefully this year we're going to be building a little bit more of the community that actually attend, and extend that beyond just the one day event.
And when you think about the event and what people will walk away with, what are the takeaways that you think your attendees should walk away with, and what do you think they want to walk away with?
I think they want to walk away with some practical ideas that they can implement immediately, so they can get a good return on investment. And I think that's what we're trying to do with the agendas this year. This year focuses a lot on behavioral psychology. Behavioral science is something that is really, really influential in other sectors, and it hasn't really had so much of an engagement within the hospitality industry before. But this is really about how the guest makes decisions, and how psychologically you can basically engage with them to ensure that they feel that they are the ones that have some agency over what they're doing in terms of the booking process. So they have some control, giving them some level of ability to make their own decisions as they engage with you within that booking process. So there's a lot of that. So I'm hoping that people will start to understand that it's not super complicated. It's really easy to craft copy and text to really engage with the customer in a different way. And then there's a whole load of other stuff that people need to be looking at in terms of the value proposition that they offer guests, because guests are looking to engage with companies that reflect their own values, and that's key. And again, revenue managers need to understand that it's not just a marketing thing. It is something that they need to be aware of and be able to influence as well. So that's, from my point of view, that's really exciting. There's a whole load of tech out there that also that we want revenue managers to be aware of, that basically need to be incorporated within the role nowadays. So by way of example, before you ask me, because I know you will, it'll be...
Am I getting that predictable?
I think so. You've got things like the automation of repetitive tasks within the reservation function. Now that should be a given, because that builds in efficiency, and it builds in extra time for the res team to do what they do best, which is talking to guests. You have the revenue management systems that are going to be there, which are going to be talking about any innovation that they have, and also new ways of guests booking and interacting, the user experience on websites. So you've got suppliers that will be looking at the UX. You've got suppliers that will be looking at how to engage younger generations through social, and then you've got the revenue management systems, so and automation of the res function. So lots of different tech suppliers there.
So when we think about what we hear as a common theme, and user is largely center, and it's very interesting listening to you through our chat, that user loops have come up a number of times in a relatively short period of time, right? I heard you say that your user loop from your own customers, right? So tell us what you want on the platform, and hopefully you're communicating with them and saying, hey, you gave us an idea, and here it is implemented. The notion of I thought was interesting about the communication side of training revenue managers to learn how to interpret and communicate what they're working with, because it's getting more complex. And then finally, at the event, the behavioral side of trying to understand all the different user profiles and adapting and innovating to speak to them in the way they want to be spoken to. That I think we're really and our take on it, for the sake of our take, to give you a rest for a minute, is that the impact of that we're seeing interviewing a lot of people and the advisory side, is that the user experience piece is becoming even more demanding. It's become far more of what am I going to get for the money I'm paying now, because of the average rate has gone up, and the perception of value may be changing, and they want more. I think we all want more. You go spend another 30%
Yeah,
more. What
yeah.
am I getting for it? So, that's interesting that you're bringing it all together and putting that into a space that can be condensed into one day on January 31st in this year, right, in 2023. So that's pretty
Thank you.
impressive. Well done. So when you think of how the 2023 and 2024 starts to look, do you think the hospitality space can continue to hold price integrity and hold a new floor of pricing going into next year?
I think the answer to that is probably. So I don't think we're going to see these double-digit percentage increases in ADR anymore. I don't think there's enough room in the market for that. But I think there's definitely room for hotels to hold their own. And this goes back again to, as you say, to this really good interpretation of understanding what guests need and fully communicating why you feel that you're adding value as a hotel to that guest experience. So from a pricing point of view, yes, rates may well are going to hold, but you're not going to really huge increases. I don't think there's enough room in the market for that. The challenge that hotels will have is managing cost and the economic environment. So the two, firstly, you've got your cost of energy, and then and the cost of employment, particularly particularly in the UK now, where the minimum wage has gone up. So hotels will need to find pockets of opportunity to support improving revenues. If there's no improvement, if there's not a lot of headroom on the rate increase, then you have to find pockets of pricing efficiency, if that's how we call it. And it could be either process efficiency, contracting efficiency. There's a lot of different ways to look at pricing from an efficiency point of view. And so that would be my advice for next year, is really look for where you're losing, where you're just basically leaking pricing opportunity, and basically manage those leaks. And then from the other side is this very volatile economic and political environment that we're working in. And revenue managers have never really had to deal with that before. They've had a good 10 years of very stable external environments, so that enabling them to basically drive forward strategies that really had limited traction. Limited kind of like anything pushing against them. That's what I mean. Like full traction, nothing coming against them. Whereas now they really need to take into consideration a lot more of the external environment. So that'll be interesting to see how they do. And you need to see what strategies are going to work and what strategies don't.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, there are parallels all up and down the ecosystem with asset managers having. You could have that conversation with an asset manager. So, revenue management, I think, is going to become much more in yield, and I'd like to explore yield in a minute, but the yielding of the space, the optimization, you've used that quite a bit. It is volatile, it is unpredictable. So the predictable tools, or the predictive tools, not predictable, probably with what you're helping with and encouraging and teaching and advocating in conferences, probably more apropos in the age when it might be possible to say, or some say, that maybe the role of the revenue manager is declining. So what I'm hearing you saying is they may be a little bit more important than they used to be.
I think so. I think they're being asked to step up to the role, to basically provide not just a couple of price points and how the market's doing, which is it's very easy to fall into that trap of just doing the same thing week after week. But if you look at what's actually happening outside in the external environment, and also what's happening in terms of the guest, excuse me, you really have to have a much broader commercial approach to how to run the role now. And I think that's something that a lot of revenue managers are going to need to take into consideration next year, definitely.
So when you look again into the next 12, 18 months for your business? Now, you're speaking about other people's businesses. Uh, what are you doing to adapt and innovate moving forward based on all the conditions you've just highlighted?
We basically are about to roll out a product called Revenue Unpacked. So Revenue Unpacked looks at all of the different elements of revenue management, and it's trying to provide the revenue services in a way that a hotel wants them. So sometimes you don't want the whole outsourced product. You just need maybe a phone call every week, half an hour. I just need to know how I'm doing. Or it might be that actually as a budding revenue manager, you don't even need that. You just want to know that there's somewhere you can go, like a forum, where you can ask a question and you can get an answer back from a fully qualified revenue manager within a certain time period. So those are the kind of areas that we're looking at to sort of really tease out what do people really need, rather than saying, this is my product and I'll do your daily reports, your weekly revenue meeting, your monthly reports, and great, so what? What are you actually really, what are you really doing to actually engage with the hotel and help the hotel grow? And I think the danger of outsourcing is that you have this pipe to the hotel and the revenue manager, and then if you cut the pipe, the hotel's left with nothing. What we want to do is really ensure that the hotel grows and uses the revenue management function in a way that best suits them, and really in this environment supports improving the skills of the existing team, retention of team members, because that's hugely important. You don't want to have to go out and buy in new staff as soon as you train them. I have heard general managers say, I'm afraid of training up someone because they'll just go. That's not how it should be. We need to find ways of keeping people engaged and really, really interested. And that's kind of what Revenue Unpacked is trying to do.
It's great to have all that stitched together in a way that there are careers that can be built, and people move up in their careers, but people leave managers, not careers. So
Yeah.
hopefully the managers are looping back and saying, maybe I should learn a little bit about that too. So
Yeah.
that's fantastic. So there's a lot going on clearly in the space, and thanks for that. So I'm not too sure everybody knows this, but if they dig through your profile, they'll see that you came from different routes than many, in pharmacology, toxicology.
Yeah.
And so are you working some of this magic stuff that you know how to concoct into all these events? Is it in the brownies? Is that that's why these events go well?
Oh, I
So
wish.
what's with this?
Oh yeah, no. And to be fair, I probably do use a little bit of the background of science in what I do, but I did make a bit of a huge leap of faith many years ago, having done my degree, and I worked in the forensic science service for a while, and
Hold
then
on, you're jumping over the toxicology bit. What's with this?
the toxicology bit.
Yeah.
Toxicology is just pharmacology but gone wrong. So it's just basically drug action, drug action, but kind of like not what you expected. So and it's really interesting. I mean, it's a fabulous area to look at. But I didn't want to work for a drug company.
There's something in the brownies on January 31st.
Yeah, there may well be. So I did work in hospitality a lot when I was young. So I've always been very keen on that. And so I flirted with advertising for a while, and then jumped client side to Galileo, and then basically focusing on e-commerce and distribution, which then morphed into revenue management, because I am that old and revenue management wasn't really around that much when we first started Revenue by Design.
So that's amazing. So now we're talking about behavioral, which I think is fascinating. I mean, we do not spend enough time incorporating that particular understanding. Now, in all fairness, Stanford and others recognized that a long time ago in behavioral studies, and really developed an incredible program about how to keep all of us interested in clicking. And so it's great to see that you're bringing that sort of conversation to the space, that I hope you promote aggressively, because user experience is nothing about user experience unless you have an interest in understanding the user.
Yeah.
For some reason, we've kind of created. I remember somebody saying to me that it's amazing that there's two groups that are called users. One of which are someone who's addicted,
Right.
and users on the internet. So that's the only two groups. So we keep talking about users, and there is an addiction to it. And I think that was whoever came up with that term and kind of framed that term
Yeah,
has
yeah,
put us into that
interesting.
category. But we spend little or no time in universities, in PhDs, or generally, particularly our space, doesn't seem to think about that stuff. I mean, we talked previously about user heat maps, footfall, all sorts of the other tools that other industries use, and I rarely hear that conversation in the hospitality space about footfall, heat maps as to what the peaks and troughs of usage is. Sensors. We're so concerned about the sensors and yielding the room and when to turn it on and turn it off. Yet, there's thousands of cubic square feet or meters, depending on which language you're speaking, that is largely unused or yielded. So maybe a huge opportunity there for the world of revenue by design. Anyway, thank you so much, Ali, for taking the time. We've learned a great deal about you and your topics. I hope everybody has a good look into the world that is revenue by design. And
Thank you.
and just one last comment on why should people come to Revenue by Design on January 31st, 2023?
If you really want to learn how to adapt to the future and really get more guests on board, then I think you should really come. So that'd be my
It's as
main
simple as
takeaway.
that. You might actually
Yep.
understand how to talk to them as well.
Yep.
So thanks everybody for listening this week, Ali. It's been a pleasure, even though we are up here in the north and you're in lovely Mallorca with some sunshine. Is that this has been a terrific 40 odd minutes together where we have spent some time talking about the world that is revenue management, how important it is, and as importantly, how the leaders in revenue management need to probably accelerate adaptation and innovation to stay relevant and be more the interpreter and the real pilot, as opposed to maybe being a little passive. And I think this conversation is encouraging that. Secondly, these principles that we're looking into 2023 and 2024 is very much about, there's a parallel conversation for asset managers, investors, owners, and all of the others that are looking at how do I actually sweat my asset. That's a euphemism from the property world, but actually optimizing the asset in a different way. And it's going to take a lot more hard work in comparison to the last 10 years, where we've seen accretive valuations simply by being passive to some extent, relatively passive. So it's a new era and new skills, and that's why we cover this on the Adapters and innovation focused conversations. So thanks again for listening. We look forward to chatting with you again next week. Thanks to everybody for listening, and keep looking over the fence.